fucking hate these kids. Jesus Christ. Dude. Hey everyone, and we were just talking about the Olympics. Welcome back. Some of you might be thinking, well, how come the Olympic logo has 5 rings? Well, it hails back to the fact that there were 5 nations that originally competed. We have the Greeks, the Romans, the Japanese, the Egyptians, and of course the Americans. Now, if we look at the events of the Olympics, we'll see that back then we can see something familiar such as the marathon, but also some events that are quite different than what we compete in today. For example, the 10-meter dash, the pebble throw, the centathlon. But really, take a moment and you might notice, why are there no swimming events? Well, that's because that swimming wasn't invented until the 1920s. Now, it wasn't always rosy when it came to the Olympics. It became such a huge event that it attracted nations from across the world, and that led to some tension because Russia was banned from the Olympics. They failed blood and urine tests. And why was that? Well, people got very suspicious when records were set that didn't make any sense. Russian high jumpers were jumping higher than nations could pole vault. So that led to their testing and eventually their banishment. Well, if we look at the Olympics, it was actually originally a fest that was dedicated to Zeus. As the story goes, when Zeus was young, Heracles and his 4 brothers, Huey, Dewey, Louie, and Blowy, would race to the top of Mount Olympus. Zeus would then reward the winner with an olive wreath. And that's why we can see olive wreath as a symbol for the Olympics even today. Now, if I keep telling you these stories about the Greek gods and mythology, I feel like I need to give you a primer, a lesson on all of Greek mythology and the origins of the universe according to the legends. So, let's shift gears and let's see what we got. Murder, incest, bestiality. Am I talking about a weekend at my townhouse? Maybe. But what I'm really talking about is Greek mythology, which unfortunately contains all of those elements. But I will start out by looking at how Greeks viewed the origin of the universe. Now, Greeks were a big proponent of the Big Bang, the fact that the universe expanded rapidly from a singularity, and it cooled, allowing dust to settle and form these complex structures such as galaxies and solar systems and stars and planets. And it's an interesting tale, but we now know, thanks to modern science, that most of this has been disproven. If we go to Mount Olympus, a very legendary place, this was where the Olympic gods, resided. Remember, they were the children of Titans, and the reason they picked this locale was because it was said that no mortal human can make it to the summit. Approximately 10,000 tourists per year go to the summit. And the reason for that is something I want to demonstrate on this graph that I made. You see, in ancient times, Greeks used to be very, very small. Approximately if you were bigger than 1 foot, you were considered a big person. But draw your attention to 2 data points I have. One, at about time 0, the time when Jesus died, and we'll see that the Greeks were rewarded for converting to Christianity with great height increases. In fact, they regularly became 10 feet tall. At the second data point, though, you'll notice a sharp decline, and that's when an asteroid hit the Earth. The cloud and dust blocked out the sunlight and prevented crops from growing. Therefore, meaning there was less food to eat, therefore, Greeks shrunk in size. Until about today, the average height is about 5 feet tall. So who exactly were the gods? Well, there was 12 Olympians. Some would say 13, but most agree on 12. And the leader, without question, was Zeus, the god of lightning. Well, I question that, because in my view, the god of the sea, Poseidon, ruled more of the earth. The earth is comprised of more water than land, and if we're talking per metric volume, I think the leader is actually Poseidon. So kids, tell your teacher that and wait for a jaw-dropping reaction. I don't mean to ruffle feathers, but we only like to use science here. Now, if we go to the origin of the gods, we'll see that at first only chaos existed. And chaos gave rise to 5 primordial gods. It was said that these 5 primordial gods, if you got them together, they were invincible, undefeatable. But unfortunately, it wasn't in the cards. Because 2 of them, Uranus and Gaia, came together to give birth to Cronus, who was, as we know, the father of Zeus. Now, if you're having trouble keeping track, I want you to close your eyes and just think. Every time someone says grandparents, think gay Uranus, father, Cronus, grandchild, Zeus. And that's just an easy way to keep track of things. But what we have already is a pattern of teenage rebellion. You see, Gaia was not happy with Uranus because he mistreated their children. He cast them away and imprisoned most of them, and so she fashioned a sickle to be used to take him down, and it was Cronus who volunteered to do that. So he picked up the sickle and he swung as hard as he could, and he chopped off many man parts off of Uranus that I can't mention in this public lecture, except for one part in particular, and that is the ball sack. You see, when his ball sack dropped into the ocean, it splashed and a frothy white foam appeared, and it created Aphrodite. If you don't believe me, please look it up. And it was from that point on that scrotums were known as the pinnacle of beauty in Greek society. But Uranus had a warning that Cronus would have his own son dethrone him in the same way. And it was because of that that Cronus became very paranoid. And he devoured eventually all of his own children. And he swallows them whole, except for Zeus. Zeus is hidden away, and Cronus is fed a boulder instead, faking that the boulder was Zeus. So Zeus would vow to one day free his siblings as he was hidden away in Crete, and return to Cronus masquerading as a server. Now, how would he get Cronus to release the siblings? Well, what he did is he served him Miller Lite. From that point, Cronus regurgitated and threw up everywhere, freeing the siblings and causing them to join Zeus's side in rebelling against the Titans. This was a 10-year battle, and as we all know, the Olympic gods, Zeus and his siblings, won. But Zeus went very hard on certain people in particular. For example, the Titan Syphilis. Syphilis, the myth of Syphilis was that he was destined to push a boulder up a hill, only to have it roll down, to have it pushed up again, to have it roll down, never to achieve his goal, and that would happen on for eternity and eternally. Well, another bad fate can be seen with Atlas. Atlas was punished by carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. And that's where the phrase cold shoulders came to be. If you look at that picture, the Antarctic ice shelf is what rested on his shoulders and deltoids. If we look at just the main Olympic gods, we have Zeus, who I mentioned already. We have Hera, the patron saint of divorce lawyers. She was always angry because Zeus was diddling with every woman imaginable, mortal or immortal. And then Zeus's siblings, Hades and Poseidon. Hades, who ruled over the underworld, the dead, Poseidon, the sea. And of course, we talked about the scrotally based Aphrodite. So we'll get some more gods and goddesses here. We have Athena, the goddess of wisdom, Apollo, who had music as his inspiration, also founded NASA, Ars, the god of war, and Artemis, the twin of Apollo, the goddess of hunting. If we continue on, we have Hermes, who's kind of like the messenger of the gods, Hepatitis, who is the crippled smith, And I can't include it in this lecture because this is a kid-friendly lecture, but hepatitis also gave rise to the Athenian people, the people of Athens. I want you to Google how this happened because it is filthy, disgusting, and you're just going to take one look at the story and say, Jizz Louise, this is terrible. And of course, Dionysus is the god of wine. We have two other gods that are kind of etc. No one's really sure what they do. We have Demeter, who served in the U.S. Navy for a bit, and then Patsy, who no one cared about. There was no use for Patsy. Now, I want to ask you this question. Did the Greek gods intervene in mortal life? And the answer is a resounding yes. Especially Zeus. And it's thanks to him that the whole world was at war and things would go haywire. But there's no better example of this than the War of Troy. Now, before I dig into the War of Troy, let's take a quick 5-minute break here. And you don't want to go anywhere, though. This is very exciting and the epitome of Greek drama.